Welcome to the Real Estate Reserve podcast. I'm Jason Balin from Hard Money Bankers, co-host Ian Horowitz from Equity Warehouse. Looking forward to another great interview. We got two great guests lined up that we're going to bring in here in a second. But first, if this is your first time tuning in to the podcast, welcome. Promise we'll keep this entertaining, but also educational. So it will be well worth the next 30 minutes, I promise. If you're a regular viewer, follower, listener, whatever, thanks again for all the support. We couldn't do it without you. We certainly appreciate it. We like to bring in live local guests that are actually out there right now, you know, in the front lines doing real estate transactions, either commercial transactions or residential transactions. So definitely looking forward to this interview, Ian.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely excited for this one. I think people will get a lot of value out of this. And guys, if you get any value out of this, please feel free to share it. We don't care about the likes, the subscribes, none of that other crap. That's about us. It's not about us. It's about supporting our guests. We like to support their business and what they're actively doing. So if you get value out of this, please go ahead and share it. Other than that, the summer's coming up. By the time this gets out, summer will be almost wrapping up. It's been a really quick year. It's exciting. I'm still grinding out that $50 million challenge over at CRE-syndicate.com if you want to follow along what we're doing. But today's guests have actually been helping me fill this pipeline to try to get $50 million of real estate transactions done by the end of 2024. I don't know if we're going to pull it off, but it'll be interesting. But our two guests today have been assisting me with that. And we got Mike Borski and Mark Pawlowski from the Flynn Group. They're local commercial brokers up here in the Philadelphia region. Why don't we bring them in, Jay?
Hey, guys. How are you?
Good, guys. I got to say, Ian, on that intro, that little intro there's some guy looked a lot like you without a beard that came across the screen. Maybe he got brother years or something like that.
Yeah, dude, there once was a time that I was not allowed to have a beard. And you guys always ask, what does Sean do for you? That literally took Sean probably 3 days to put together that little 15-second intro. But the guy's really good at what he does. So that's what Sean does for us. That's why he's good.
In 2 years, that's what we can all strive for, a beard like that. It doesn't take that long if you're committed. I'm surprised you haven't shaved that thing off, to be honest with you.
Dude, it's been so bad. It's been so close so many times where I'm like, F it, just take it off my face. It's too hot. Screw this. But then, you know, you go and you're in a fishing tournament and you win, and then you actually look like a fisherman because you got some beard or, whatever it is. It's just, it's a trademark now. So
what's the wife thinking? And that's what really matters. It doesn't matter what you think or fishing, man. What's the wife want?
Well,
you on or off?
This is an open and transparent show, and I want to show you guys this. She said you ain't getting laid without the beard, so you better keep the beard. So beard comes off, you know that things are bad at home. So
yeah, you're gonna start being pretty ornery. So I think stay happy, man. Leave it on.
There you go. So what's up, boys? I guess you just want to give a quick background for everybody, kind of know what you guys specialize in, and we'll get into it.
Sure, go ahead, Mark. Why don't you lead it off?
Yeah, so Mark Pawlowski. I've been at the Flynn Company about 6 years now. I've known Mike Borski since I was about 5 years old, and I've known the Flynns not as quite as long as knowing Mike, but Flynn Company is a family-oriented business. We're privately held in Philly, so it's a lot of who knows who that works at the company, and it's a great atmosphere. We're focused in the Philadelphia market. We really specialize in industrial. We do have guys in the Center City market, office-based, but Mike and I are humping the street day in and day out up in the eastern Montgomery County and Bucks County areas. So we are excited to be on. Looking forward to working more with Jason. Love working with Ian so far. So this is great. Really appreciate you guys having us on today.
Yeah, hell yeah. And Mike, I guess how'd you get started in the business of, it was funny last night. He called me. He's like, hey, tomorrow's show, what's it about? You just want me to tell people I'm a real estate agent. I'm like, holy shit, a commercial broker called himself a real estate agent. I was laughing about it, but how'd you get started in the biz, and how'd you guys end up over at Flynn?
So it's actually kind of a funny story because my old man has worked at the Flynn Company for 40 years now, or 41 years, something like that. And I've known the three Flynn brothers, Kevin, Brendan, and Colin, my entire life. And just being like kind of just like a knucklehead, I never really thought about like where I was going to work after college. I just wanted to go drink beer and have fun, quite frankly, right? So I get out of college and I spend about 3 months traveling cross country in a 1988 Dodge Dakota extended bend pickup truck, having a time, no work, kids, nothing. So I had a good 3 months doing that. And I came home and I worked like a construction job just to pass some time. And then I started doing cold calling for an IT service company. And I just sat at a desk all day long and had a phone. I was supposed to, read the board that said this guy's got IT 8,000 power or whatever, whatever the cue card said to read. And I'm doing this, and I got a couple guys on the phone and they were interested, and they said, hey, why don't we meet for lunch or something like that one day and let's talk. So I said, great. And I go to my manager. I'm like, hey, I'm going to go to lunch with this guy. And they go, you're not going to lunch. You just sit here and you cold call all day long. So I said, what? That's bullshit. How are we ever going to get any business done this way? This is stupid. So I go home. I'm living with my parents at the time, like 22 or whatever. And I go home and I complain to my mom. I'm like, I got this guy on the phone. I love the cold calling aspect of it. I got the energy, the time, the enthusiasm. I want to go meet people. I want to do this. And I'm describing what I want to do and these like constraints, around me doing this at this company. And she looked at me and she's like, you idiot. Do you know what your dad does? You know what the Flynn company does? Do you ever talk to your dad about working at the Flynn company? And then I did. And he was like, look, I never wanted to press it upon you. So I'm glad that it took you, you realized it on your own that you'd be a good fit to do this. And you obviously know all the guys that work here. And, you could have started doing this 8 months ago and saved yourself this little like run around at the IT service company. But that's the short version of how I got there. And I've been there for 20 years now. So I got to get out of Penn State, did that little run around. And all I've done is this work here at the Flynn company for 20 years. And Mark joined about 6 years ago. And,
tell them how you got me hooked on. Where were we?
So how I got Mark hooked on. So we've been trying to get Mark to work at the Flynn company, probably like 15 years or something like that. Cause like you said, all the guys here know him, and he was working for a petrochemical company, polypropylene. Polypropylene. Is that what you're selling?
Yeah, you got it. Close enough.
Polypropylene. So we were trying to get him to work here forever. And we're at his bachelor party in Nashville, and, we're on our 8,000th beer about like why it's the right thing to do to come over here. And, like old man Flynn always says, deals and transactions and things happen over beers. So we had a bunch of beers at his bachelor party. That was the way that we convinced him to come on board and work here. And that was about, 6.5 years ago that we had that conversation. And here he is.
I barely remember the conversation. I think it was like we were taking a shot, and then all of a sudden it's like, yo, why don't you come work at the Flynn company? I'm like, all right, sure, man. That sounds great. And then, like a week later, he's like, remember talking at your bachelor party? I'm like, I kind of do. What the hell did we talk about, though?
Yeah, you said you signed up for the Flynn company. There's no turning back.
Yeah. Yep, here I stand. So
Jason knows about Nashville. Nashville will bite you.
It's great, man.
Many times, bachelor parties, events.
Rough.
Mike, what was your first deal at the Flynn company like what type of deal was it? Was it a lease? Was it a sale? And like, how did you get that first deal? Because I'm guessing they weren't like, here you go, here's your book of business. Like, I'm guessing, and I might be wrong about this, but I'm guessing it was like, cool, you've already been doing lots of cold calling. You probably already have somewhat relationships, maybe not in this space, but relationships in general from growing up in the area. Like how did that first deal, where did that deal come from? And like, how did that look?
Yeah, great question. So when I was working construction, leading up to before I did the cold calling thing for the IT company, I worked with a guy, his name was Ryan, who was just doing it sort of like part-time. And like a week into, not a week, probably 2-3 months into working at the Flynn company, which, just been strictly cold calling for 2 or 3 months, whatever it was. He called me up and said, hey, don't you do real estate? I said, yeah. He said, I got a buddy that's working for this company down in Philadelphia, and they need warehouse space. Do you do warehouse space in Philadelphia? And I'm like, hell yeah, I do that. Yeah, let me get in touch with the guy. So he got me in touch with the guy, and we did a 3,000 foot warehouse deal in like Port Richmond or something like that. And it was an as collected commission. So for those viewers out there that don't know what that is, that means that as the rent comes in each month, we get a check. 6% of that comes to the Flynn company. We get our piece of that puzzle. So it was like $13 a month, for like 3 years. And the guy went bankrupt about 6 months in. So my first deal was a 3,000 foot deal in Philadelphia, and the guy went bankrupt about 6 months into it. So that's how I got my taste of the business, which, you gotta learn to eat a bucket of shit in this business because it happens often. But that was my first taste in, to answer your question, Jason, a little deal in Philly. Yeah.
How about you, Mark? What was your first deal? Did you have as many trip ups, or did Mike show you the way after his 14 years of being in business?
Yeah, luckily I kind of stepped into some stuff, partnering up with Mike. But a good deal, I was cold calling a list I had from my old days at a company called Braskem, and I cold called Certainteed out of nowhere and got a hold of a guy. He's like, we're in need of space. We're looking for like 50, 60,000 square feet. And I called Mike up. I'm like, holy, like, what do I do here? Like, pretty much like, so we ended up feeling like the whole time that this group was going to say they had a national broker, but Mike was able to help me navigate that. And we ended up doing a 15-year deal.
65,000 square foot, 15-year deal in Quakertown from a cold call that Mark did. It was awesome.
Yeah. So that was like a first deal that I kind of just spurred up on my own. I guess that was in a few months. So I kind of fell into some luck there, but luckily Mike had a book that I kind of ran with, and I was dealing in Huntington Valley, as we know, is a little small 2,000 to 3,000 square foot type units, multi-tenant complex that I really cut my teeth on how to navigate through leases and all that. So besides that Certainty deal, I was kind of grinding away that way, trying to find tenants for about a 27 tenant complex. So that was eye-opening, to say the least, working with groups that just wanted to pay me in cash.
We talk about it a lot on here. I mean, it's a little different for you guys, but we talk about real estate investors and having success on the first deal, and their ability to have success on first deal sets them up for the rest of their career. Obviously Mike bounced back. He had his dad to rely on, to help him through the business. You had Mike to rely on through that business. You think if you would have tripped up and not had that sick deal day one, within your first few months, do you think you would have stayed in real estate, or is that, was that the thing that hooked you?
Yeah. I mean, Mike kind of, after that whole Nashville, experience, I'll say drunken conversation, it took a good, Mike, 10 to 12 months for me actually to kind of move over after some, back and forth. And one of the reasons why I kind of moved over into real estate was with what Mike had done up into that time frame. So, I got lucky compared to what Mike had to kind of lay the groundwork. So thanks, Mike. Always appreciative of how he set me up. But it was something that, everyone's going to have their hurdles. Everyone's going to cold call, but I kind of was a little bit more on the beneficial side of what the groundwork Mike had laid out for our business kind of coming in. And Mike kind of let me, figure it out. And it was, a trust factor that I think you have to have with anyone you do business with, right? To not, be scared of, tripping up. Everything's going to work out. But knowing Mike for, at the time, 30 years, I knew he had my back. I had his back. So let's roll.
I know.
No doubt. In a market like we're in today, are you guys busier with sales or with leasing? And then, going back from inception of when you guys, I guess, kind of each started, like, have you been able to kind of identify cycles based on where you guys are focused on? If that makes sense, if you're getting where I'm getting at on, October 2022, rates, short-term rates went up a bunch. Like, did sales halt? Did leasing, take a lot of your time? Like, I guess, where are you at now related to what do you focus on? It might be both, or where you're busy at. And then, like, could you kind of see how some of the cycles over the last, set of years have kind of impacted what you guys focus on a regular basis?
Yeah, Jason. So I'll answer the question this way. I would say that, like, our bread and butter, well, it's cyclical in a way, but it answers your question of whether do more leasing or sales is. Our prime target is someone like Ian, where we can go in and say, hey, Ian, here's a great property. You should buy this property. And when you buy this property, it's 55,000 square feet, or like the Tinicum deal, he's going to go up and build 84,000 square feet of space. So we make the commission on the sale, but then there's 84,000 square feet of leasing that, that dovetails that. So that's like what we really like focus on. We're not really like investment sale brokers where we're just like, here's a cap rate deal, go buy it at 7% and you know,
Sure.
go have a good day. We want to sell to opportunistic people where we get the assignment, we get the sale commission, and then we get the assignment to lease it. I mean, that is our bread and butter. So the sale leads into a lot of the leasing and then the relationship. So we'll, you know, folks like Ian, we're just getting to know Ian as he moved back to the area recently, but you know, we'll work on a project with him now, you know, sell it to him, lease it up. And then in 4 or 5 years, some of those tenants go vacant and we backtrack and help him out on a project we're already really familiar with. So, you know, as far as like cyclically going here, like things were bananas like 3 or 4 years ago, like during the pandemic. It was like, I remember people calling and saying, hey, I want to go look at your warehouse building. And we were like, we're not really supposed to go out. I mean, I'm good with it. I'll meet you. Are you cool? Like, you want me to stand outside or stand next to you? I don't really care. But these people were like, you know, I don't care what the law says. I have like 50 tractor trailers full of stuff. I got to go rent something tomorrow. Like, if you don't meet me out there, I'm calling your competitor. Come meet me. So like, as far as cycle goes, I mean, I don't think anyone really identified that cycle coming down the pike.
Sure.
That was just really, really very reactionary in terms of what that was. But I mean, really, like the big difference now is like we used to spend so much time cold calling, as we talked about earlier, like as we were younger in the business and the market wasn't as mature. Now, like, you know, the phone's so busy, you know, just returning phone calls and emails all day long. Like, we need to carve out time, you know, to do prospecting and things like that. So like, that's like the big, like, cyclical difference in terms of like having a more established business. And, you know, I think when you talk to a lot of people about, you know, when you get to that point in your career that like you can't be stagnant in dealing with just what you have to carve out time to establish new relationships like we have with Ian here and other folks. So I kind of went all over the place with your questions there, but hopefully I answered generally what you were asking there, Jason.
Yeah, no, I think so. And like how, you know, how big are relationships in this space? Like, I'll give you an example kind of, and we can kind of base this off the residential space. So a lot of real estate brokers, if they're leasing properties or if they're selling properties, whatever it is, they're slapping things on MLS and selling them that way. It seems like in the commercial space, it's different, where relationship is everything. Not just because, well, part of it because, you know, we want to make sure someone can perform. That's obviously important. But at the same time, you know, is it something that if you're in the commercial space, let's just say you're a buyer, and I'm speaking more investor stuff, but is it more, hey, I can just go and, you know, search listings and try to buy stuff, or are you kind of proactively reaching out to who you think is the buyer base and because you already have an existing relationship trying to sell to them? So like an investor in essence has an upper hand if they have built that relationship with, you know, a broker or a firm like you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take that one, Mike. I think, you know, we have a lot of listings that we know are coming up that we'll go to an Ian first and say, hey, this is coming up and we're going to be, you know, putting this out on the, you know, our MLS system, CoStar, LoopNet.
Yep.
And we'll go to guys like Ian first or other relationships and say, hey, you want to first look at this? Because, you know, we want Ian to continue pushing that 50 million onto the street. And we want those guys to always look at us. If they have a new opportunity, we want to be talking to, you know, that part of the relationship moving forward. And I do think, you know, having that relationship is key. Again, it all goes back to trust, you know, hey, you know, we got a good deal here, or now this isn't a good deal. Let's not proceed with this. Again, with the hope that if you buy it, you're going to look at us. And I think one thing Flynn Company specializes in is, you know, we're core market. We're not going to 3 different states. We're boots on the ground, anywhere from 2,000 up to, you know, 100,000. You know, the big boxes are, you know, getting built, but we really focus on that niche, you know, small market investor, guys that we hope grow into those bigger, you know, portfolios, but, you know, really trying to just have that core 10 relationships out in the market. Again, bringing it back to Ian that we can rely on to say, hey, this is coming out. If you want first look, you know, let's get out there, tour the building and, you know, throw in an offer if you like it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've always viewed brokers, I've told you guys this, is like, you guys are the prostitutes, right? Like, you have something I want, I have something you want, right? Like, and you're just playing the middleman. And that's how I view it in the most respectful way possible. But then, like, there's also this fear, like, dude, we've been in the business for how long? And I was like, oh, dude, I got to call these guys. Like, I don't know. I don't want to sound like an idiot. It's a new market to me. And like, it was hard for me to pick up the phone. And then you guys took me to lunch and we started to build a relationship. I think you guys recognized that I'm sure you did some due diligence on me and realized that I'm not a complete idiot and whatever else. And we finally connected on a deal. So I feel like the relationship will build from here and opportunities will come through. And, there's a lot of stuff that you'll bring and say, hey, it's all, let's see, this is the part that I like is like, hey, deal's coming down the road. What do you think? Now you have more time to prepare for that. But I guess what I'm asking is, how does a newer real estate investor, someone who's seasoned in single family or new to the market that really wants to concentrate on industrial or commercial real estate, what's the best way to approach a broker if they have no clue what they're doing in the commercial world? Because it is a little bit different than dealing in residential real estate. What suggestions would you guys make for those type of guys?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because the barriers to entry into like a little niche market are very difficult. We do get those calls from somebody that says, hey, I've got, I got $1 million. I want to buy a $3-4 million property. And, what do you have, kind of a thing. And, right now the industrial market is strong enough that, if we have a listing that we know we can, sell and that we could lease up, selling it to a first time investor is very risky for us, because, their ability to perform is really, really important. So I think if somebody is a first time buyer, I think the education process is really, really important to understand, structure of deals, to understand timing for deals, to understand like how they work, and, to be able to talk to a broker in a way that they believe you, that they can actually execute. And I guess that's easier said than done, because if you've never done it before, you don't really know what to say and how to say it. But we've got so many different things going on that somebody calls and wants to get involved. You have to convince us that you're not going to waste our time, which you probably are going to do if you aren't educated on what needs to happen. And, it's not just saying that you have enough money. Like, there's a lot of people out there that have $1 million to go put down and buy a property. It's being able to execute and being able to trust. And I think that goes, that street goes two ways. So a lot of anything's relationships. When we had lunch with Ian, we're like, oh, we can work with this guy. He's easy to deal with. He's educated. He's smart. Like, he will perform. We will make money together, but we also like him. It's nice to be around the guy. It's enjoyable. He's a real person, right? So
this is a recording, right?
I was going to say, they talk about the same Ian.
Yeah, I don't know.
It was that guy without the beard in the intro.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what I was talking about. So I think it's a difficult thing to do, to be now, Ian, you were first time in this market, but you had bought a lot of real estate before. There's a big difference between being educated, having executed in other markets, and just learning this market, and never having bought a real estate or commercial real estate property before. That's a very difficult barrier by itself.
Yeah. So Mark, like, what pitfalls would new commercial investors run into? And I know they're probably the common ones, and I'll set you up a little bit, but like surveys, phase ones, like what other pitfalls are we looking at that people should be aware of and have the conversation? I mean, I tell people in my coaching group, dude, if you're afraid, just be honest. Be like, listen, man, like, my first time calling a commercial broker, I just want to put that right out there and get it out of the way. And I feel like you guys also want to sometimes help people. I know it's not your core business, but you do want people to be successful so you can get more clients. So I don't know if you know of any pitfalls that people should look out for.
Well, I think if you're not honest, right, and saying you're new, the assumption is that what you're doing, right? So we're going to skip over some things that maybe will take a little more time explaining, both on the lease and the sale side. I mean, I think the biggest hurdle these days, and what has really changed over the last year or two, is lending, right? So what is that process? Are you going to go with an SBA? You're going to go traditional financing, and knowing what your avenues of going, or do you have cash? Like Mike said, you have just $1 million you're ready just to throw out there. Do you have the down payment? Do you have other investors? Like what are all those hurdles? I mean, because you can put an LOI in, but then to Mike's point, are you going to be able to perform? So having the ability to understand like what your due diligence period, how much do you need to go through an environmental? How much, like you said, the phase one, is there potential for a phase two? How do you associate that with your deal? What's the NOI? Meaning, the operating income for those tenants. Are those guys coming in and out of the property on a year-to-year basis? Is it stabilized? Are these tenants, long-term good credit tenants? So looking at all those aspects of the deal as a new entrant versus a guy like yourself or other relationships, knowing like, hey, we know there's, out of the 5 tenants, 3 of these guys are credit risk. So we have to factor that and underwrite that property a little differently versus someone that's coming in and be like, oh, this is 5 tenants, great, but not knowing that 3 of those tenants are leaving within 3 months of them buying the property. So they're going to be vacant maybe for 3 to 6 months. So
how much due diligence on the listing broker side, and this obviously varies by asset type and size, I'm sure, but like, do you guys try to encourage the seller to get due diligence docs like Alta surveys and environmental studies and things like that ahead of time, so you have that prepared for, buyers, for obviously saving time? If there's any real environmental issues, what that is ahead of time, stuff that you'd rather just kind of nip in the bud ahead of time and be like, hey, listen, some of this stuff's going to be expensive and it's going to be time consuming, but let's get this done first, because we know that, Alta surveys are taking a lot of time these days. And if there are environmental issues and phase 2s, do need to exist, like, what's the time frame? What needs to be remediated? Like, is that something that's typically done ahead of time, or is it more, I think this is a fair price, let's get this thing listed and let the buyer determine if either they or their lender is requiring it?
So yeah, the more that we can get done up front, the more willingness by the seller to do that work, the better off we are and they are. And we often position to them this way. If I'm a buyer and you say you have no environmental report, you have no Alta survey, you have no floor plan, and you have no rent roll, well, I got to assume that there's something wrong in all aspects of what you're not giving me. And not because you necessarily are hiding anything, but just because if I don't know, I have to underwrite that there's gaps in that and there's value lost. So that's the most important. We say the value assumption is lost there. So you might have to spend $25,000 to do an Alta survey, a phase 1, a floor plan, a physical condition assessment. But now you know all this information. So if we know all this information, we have so much more control over that negotiation process because we know all the variables that are oftentimes unknown. So I think Jason, it's a really good point. And the more often that somebody can do all that up front, the better value we can extract from the deal, because we can negotiate from a point of certainty and knowledge as opposed to guessing, which people always underwrite the guessing to be problematic.
Yeah. We could talk about Ambler. Just toss that out there if you guys want to use a real life case study.
I'm going to go rent that up in about 15 minutes. So,
Well, before you go rent it up, I'll touch on it, Mark, and then you can talk about what we're doing there. But it's a perfect example, Ian. So 152 South Main Street in Ambler is 11,700 square feet of old industrial product, and it was run by an oil company for like 50 years. So the guys asked us to come in and say, can you sell the property for us? What's it worth? And I said, before you do anything, go get a phase 1 study. I said, well, why? What are you talking about? I said, you have to go do a phase 1 study on this property now, because it's an oil distribution facility for years, and the buildings look beat to shit, and it looks like there's environmental issues everywhere. Everybody would look at this site and know there's environmental issues just by the way it looks. And if you have no Alta survey and you have no floor plans, you want me to say what it's worth? I have no idea. It's going to be a big guess. Now, they did do at that time, they agreed to do a floor plan, and they did agree to do a phase 1. The phase 1 came back uncertain, and they wanted to continue with trying to sell the property with an uncertain phase 1. And we were getting offers for that property between $950,000 and $1.3 million for the property. And at the end of the day, make a long story short here, is the environmental issues were not resolved. There was environmental continued remediation required of monitoring wells for 8 consecutive quarters on the property. And the value of that was like $80,000 to fix it. And they didn't want to deal with it. To make a long story short, we went to Ian and said, hey, man, you want to buy this thing? You can buy it. These guys are exhausted because of this process. We don't have a site plan. Here's the floor plans. But you now have to put monitoring wells onto the property, deal with the DEP, deal with your environmental company for 8 consecutive quarters. And that lost them. Ian ended up buying the property for $700,000, where we had offers at $1.3 million. Now, if this work was resolved early on in the game, I don't know that they would have gotten $1.3 million still, but they might have gotten $950,000 or $1 million or something like that. But essentially, they lost substantial value, which Ian was able to capitalize on. And Mark's going to go lease a piece of it up here in about 20 minutes or so.
Yeah, that's exciting. But I think those are some of the pitfalls or the things that people get scared of. I mean, how many times, Mark, have you seen that like someone brings up the word environmental and buyers just disappear? Like, is that commonality, or how many of your sophisticated investors can actually navigate the environment piece and get comfortable with properties and still transact on them?
I would say, a good amount is comfortable. Some more than others. Like yourself, you were fine with taking that on, extracting value because you saw the long-term potential of the property. There's other guys that we deal with that are like, we want everything clean. We don't want to deal with it. But if it's something that is minor on an environmental side of things, they'll take it on. But I think the people that really get nervous are the owner users that are coming in. They need to, depending on the product or operation, that varies, but they want to come in and just have a clean property. They don't want any guesses because they're going to be using the site, and investors a little bit more of a risk taker.
Yeah.
So I think
investors are familiar with it. The owner users aren't. Sorry for interrupting you, Mark. Go ahead.
No, all good. I just think it's your level of experience in all reality as an investor. You might dive in and all of a sudden you're monitoring. You're like, I'll never again. But I would say most of the guys that are going to dive in as investors, I mean, that's the value add part of the property. You come in, you buy it at a lower cost, you put everything you need to do it, stabilize it, and then you either refi or you sell it for a higher price point. So
that's also kind of a good selling proposition to your owners as a listing broker of, hey, these are the two buyers that we're going to have. We're going to have an owner user who could pay a premium because they're going to run their business out of it, but it needs to be clean because they want to, just like a residential property, they want to move in property. They want a property they can operate and move their equipment into immediately. Or you got an investor, and an investor is going to want a discount because they're going to be doing hard work and they need to make an arbitrage. They need to make, a return on their money. So, and as you can see, that was a gap. That was like a 30% gap of Ian's purchase price compared to what maybe market rates were. And by Ian taking the risk, doing the heavy lifting, that's going to be money that potentially, they capture.
Jason, that's a great point. Like we have a property, Ian's looked at it, and I won't say the address, but the owner is a guy that doesn't live locally, kind of a legacy type situation. I think Mike and Ian know the property I'm talking about, but sees all the transaction prices per square foot going at X, and it's like, you have a property, you have to dump in $500,000 to get it to that point to sell it at that number, or you can part ways with it for, call it whatever, $50 a square foot less, and you don't have to worry about it. What do you want to do? And we're going back and forth, still not an answer. So if you're willing to put the time, effort, and capital into something, you're going to get a higher price point. But if you're going to go in and just say, I just want to sell it, expect that number, well, that makes our job and life a little difficult.
Right, because it's not just the value, right? If the work's $500,000, somebody's got to put their time and effort into that $500,000 worth of work. So someone might say, all right, it's $500,000 worth of work, but it's going to take me 6 months, and my time's worth $250,000. So I'm going to put a buffer on that because there might be a buffer on that. So I'm going to offer you $900,000 less. It's not a dollar for dollar trade. There's time value of it and considered into it as well.
Yeah, and I think that's where, like, circling back to even where this conversation started, related to relationships in general, as somebody who's an investor, commercial investor who wants to purchase property or find value add opportunities, like, that's where the relationships come in. Because I know I'm very familiar with Ambler, and Ian and I've spoken a lot about it, and I get it, but like, it's not one of those things that like someone's just going to go scrape CoStar or go, look on LoopNet or whatever and find an opportunity like that, because it's not going to be thrown in their face like that. It's got to be a situation where you have a relationship with brokers, you have a relationship with somebody, and they're bringing you an opportunity where it says, hey, listen, like, here's a deal where we probably won't be able to get this thing sold at top dollar. This is why, make us an offer, come in what something's reasonable, and I'll show it to my seller and see if it makes sense. So I think that's a good example.
Well, I think with all that hair on that one, if I was a new buyer and I called up these guys and they started telling me the environmental issue, thanks for the transparency, but like, there's also a buyer side where you're like, I don't know if I really want to smack these guys in the teeth and be like, listen, it's only worth, I think my original offer was like 600 and the guy finally came crawling back at 700. But I think there was also a lot of, hey, this guy's done other deals. here's his profile,
Yes.
and all those other things. How often, like when you're transacting properties, let me say this correctly. I want to say guiding, but the LOIs that come in, how much background information on the buyer are you giving to your sellers to make the correct decision? If you know what I'm trying to say.
Very timely question there, and I'll avoid specific details. You probably know this. You know this property as well, and you're not bidding on it. But we have a property right now. It's about a 35,000 foot property we're on the market with for sale. It's a Class C asset. It needs roof work. It has a parcel issue. It needs new heaters. It's a tenant through the end of the year. Then it's going to be vacant. It's at the end of a cul-de-sac. It's a difficult property to get financing on. It's a different property to close on. But we have 5 offers on the property, and we have one of them is a home builder, and then the other 4 are investors. And it's a really, really important to the equation. Now, they're all very similar prices, these 5 offers that we have, within a very small percentage of each other. And we're actually working on setting up a meeting with the seller, where the seller is going to say, what do you know about each of these buyers? Which is a really, really important part of the equation, because we can say, well, this specific person we've transacted 20 times with over 20 years, and they've performed 95% of the time. This other buyer, I don't know them, and I can't say that they will or they will not perform, because I just don't know them. Not that they're a good guy, bad guy. I just don't know. This other guy I did 5 deals with. This other guy, you know what? I've heard that he bailed on 50% of the deals that he put under contract. So specifically in this case, when you're very, very close on price and your due diligence time frame is the same, the variables with dealing with the parcel issue, dealing with roof, dealing with an old building, it's just it's a typical situation where you'd expect somebody to go into due diligence and go, well, I agreed to this price, but the roof, but the parcel, but this or that. We got to vet that all up front. So the relationships we have with people that we, even if we're not saying we're guiding or that we want this person to get the deal, if you're able to honestly say, we've done 20 deals with this person over the last 20 years and they've closed 95% of the time, that value is very, very real, versus somebody might be 50 or 100 grand higher, but we don't know them. So Mr. Seller, do you want to take the risk to get 50 or 100 grand more? We can't stand behind this person that's 50 or 100 grand more, not because they're bad or good. We just don't know them. Or if you take this guy that's 50 or 100 grand less, we know them and can stand behind them and say, there's a very, very good likelihood that they will close. That is relationship, and that is truth. I don't look at that as guidance. That's a fact of the matter that you can point to. And a seller needs to make that decision of taking a risk for a higher price with an unknown party, or dealing with someone that's a very known party that you can stand behind and attest to their ability to close based on history.
And one thing I'll add to that before we move on is, that one guy say they do go with that we don't know. All of a sudden, we get 60 days down the road, they do spit the hook. Now we're back on the market. All these other guys were going back to whoa. My original offer is now X amount lower, right? Because they're like, we know you didn't go with us, so we're not offering that same rate. So that trickle down effect could be huge when it comes to transacting the property at the end of the day. So our kind of reputation's on the line. Maybe $100,000 less. We know this guy's going to perform. So there is some weight to that offer.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I know you got to go here in a few minutes, but one last question, at least for me anyway, is your book of business. We're probably in the top 25 market in the United States. For Philadelphia's got to be in the top 25 MSA, I would assume. How much institutional purchasing are you seeing versus guys like us in this submarket?
Well, I would say this. I think that in this submarket, there's key points where the institutional people want to be, and there's other points that they don't necessarily want to be. So I'll use the 476 interchange at Lansdale. Like, that's a really key point where you're seeing institutional, partners in there. And there's a lot of growth going on right there from institutional capitals. But I mean right there within like 2 miles of the interchange, because that's quick on and off. You can get up to the Lehigh Valley to 80. You can get down to the Turnpike. Now, once you get further into like Sellersville and Telford and Quakertown and those markets, do you see some institutional investors? Yes. But the majority of that is more localized, because it's more localized tenants and it's more localized capital. And that's where those tenants that rent in those spaces in an internalized market like that, they don't need brand new box, 36-foot clear type of institutional product. They just want, efficient, clean, and reasonably priced. So I would say that this marketing, to generalize it, probably 75% of it is local internalized type of investor such as yourself, and 25% is institutional. But you'll see the institutional is, right at those pockets like the interchange, and then scattered here or there throughout the rest of the market. But location, as I always say, and that's really where the big money wants to chase and where the big product wants to be versus internalized and more local type of a market.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because, you hear a lot of people talk, and we were seeing it in Baltimore a little bit with them buying up single families. It's just interesting to hear because everyone's like, oh, BlackRock's ruining this and these guys are doing that and REITs this and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's actually interesting to see. And it's good to know that there's still opportunity for guys like us to get out there and buy stuff and still have an impact on your local community.
I think there's a lot more of mom and pop buyers than institutional buyers. It's just hard to see that because, some of the primo assets institutions are buying up, but it's the same thing with data that I have on private loans out there. The majority of the private loans are still made by private capital sources, not capital sources that are selling to institutional back Wall Street firms. It's the same data. It's the same stuff. It doesn't seem like that on a regular basis.
Yeah.
When you're on the front lines and you're getting beat, on deals from a capital partner that has cheaper capital than you, that could potentially have bigger and better resources, and honestly don't even know if they care about even making money on some of these things or short-term money on these things. So you can't even compete with them on that. But there is still so much, private sector stuff, which is good. And I think in a lot of these markets, and I don't know, I think my opinion is that's going to continue to be, like that, depending on obviously what markets turn. But, like if markets soften just a bit, a lot of the inexpensive capital, they'll go find another asset class to go mess with.
Yeah. And I think the other point about that too is, Jason, a really, really good point is you see on the front page of the paper, the 1 million square foot deal. Well, meanwhile, there's 100 deals that are 50,000 square feet going on in the background. You don't see on the front page of the paper that are done more by the local private type groups and, the big BlackRock type of deals, which obviously happen. They're just what you see in the front page of the Business Journal, not, the stuff that's
equity warehouse. Equity warehouse and Ambler sale doesn't show up at
Nah, dude, I'm a LinkedIn specialist right now, dude.
There you go, man.
Everybody's reaching out. I got this, I got that. So, but dude, sometimes, a lot of that's ego too, right? Those guys want that. That's what they play for, and it is what it is. But it's just interesting to see. It's good to know that this submarket, we've had our commercial brokers from Baltimore on, similar conversation. It's real interesting to see as the markets grow and what's going to happen here. I won't make it political, but we'll see what happens between now and November. I would assume September there's some interest rate cuts. It'll be interesting to see what happens there too, and how the markets react overall from a leasing, a purchasing, and just continue to go. So
I think one other way to sum all this up is, for everybody listening and viewing is, stay local, familiarize yourself with local markets and local experts. And like, for instance, I don't know how to invest in California, and I'm not looking to invest in California. And I know that there's a lot of real estate investors, commercial and residential, that do buy stuff nationwide. And I don't know. I think Ian also you've come to the realization that like your local assets are so much easier to manage than your other stuff. And, sometimes it takes time and you learn the hard way to do so. And we only lend locally in markets that we really, really know. And, I don't know. And point being is as you're building relationships, stick with somebody local, like Mike and Mark, that know that particular area, right? Like a nationwide broker that's out of California or whatever. Like, what do they know about the market? I hate to say it. They can look at analytics and data like we all can, but they don't know.
Do they believe it?
Yeah. Like you don't know. Listen, let's be honest. In general, you look at a lot of statistics on a national basis and you're like, oh, real estate market's in the tubes, or the interest rates screwing everybody. But, and that might be the case in like whatever, some regular town that we don't know anything about. But like, we all are experts in our local communities and our local markets and our local states, counties, municipalities. And like, we know what that area is. Like, I lend on a lot of, smaller office buildings where some people are like, oh, office is the worst asset class. And it's like, well, that might be. Like, I'm not lending on a skyscraper in Manhattan, but I'm lending on whatever, a 10,000 square foot office building in Columbia, Maryland, where my office is. And I'm very familiar with that. And I have the resources and ways to execute on that. So I think like some big takeaways from this podcast was relationships, stay local, and, just keep, be out there grinding and, meeting people and learning, and just be proactive.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Before we let you guys go and tell everybody where you could be found on the internet if people want to reach out, what's one book or podcast? I don't know if you guys are into that, but like, what's one book or podcast that you've read or reading or somebody should know about?
You listen to more podcasts than I do, Mark. You go ahead, man.
Yeah, I mean, one that's always thrown our way is like the Lipsy podcasts that I've listened to before. I just jump on any of them, to be honest with you. Sometimes I just go on Spotify and they have the real estate, what's going on in the market. Sometimes they're a little dry, but I don't really do a lot of reading. And
so you got cut off when you said you didn't do reading, huh?
He probably was saying he's got 3 kids under 5 years old that take up all his time.
Yeah, master's, and it took me 5 years, and I I said, am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, I was gonna say with the kids and having to read for my MBA for 5 years, I couldn't pick up a book for a little bit of time, but I'm getting back into it. So if anyone has any suggestions, I'm all ears.
Right on. We'll get you the reading list that comes through this podcast. Guys, this has been awesome. Where's the best place? Someone wants to reach out, talk about a Philadelphia market. They have something they want to sell. They have something they want to lease, or they want to get into something to invest around in this area after you guys send me the deals first. Where's the best place people can find you?
There's some way we can, our website's www.flynnco, FLYNNCO.com, which you could start with that, or if there's some way to flash our emails across the screen or something like that, Ian, that would be cool too, because I would say, email is the best way to start for Mark or I, or you can go to our website. But also we're pretty busy on LinkedIn, so we could if there's some way we can share our LinkedIn information as well. We have a lot of posts on what we're doing and going on and deals closed and things like that out there.
We'll get all that stuff in the show notes for everyone. Guys, this has been absolutely awesome. I'm excited to continue to build this relationship, close a few more deals that we have, and we'll continue to do some case studies. We'll have you back on, do some case study on some other deals that we're working on as they close, and we'll go from there. We appreciate you guys.
No, I appreciate you guys. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Ian. Appreciate it, guys.
See you guys.
Thanks for tuning in to the Real Estate Reserve podcast. Do us a favor and like, comment, and share our broadcast. It helps the algorithm and helps us spread the word too. Till next time, thank you for tuning in.